He's watching, waiting, hoping you'll fall apart, hoping you'll call, cry, beg. But what if this time you don't? What if instead of breaking, you rise? What if your silence speaks louder than any text you'll never send? He expected your pain, not your peace. And the moment you stop reacting, you take your power back. Stay right here, because I'm about to show you exactly how to make him regret ever thinking you'd fall. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to say nothing at all. When someone expects you to break down, to reach out, to fold under pressure, silence becomes your greatest weapon. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about proving that your emotions are no longer for their entertainment. You're not bottling it up, you're building inner strength. Choosing silence is not avoidance, it's intentional. It means you've shifted the focus back to yourself. It means your energy is no longer up for grabs. He might think you're crumbling, but what you're actually doing is reclaiming your peace. You don't owe anyone an emotional performance, and you definitely don't owe anyone your breakdown. There's a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is emotional, it's fast, impulsive, and often driven by pain or frustration. But when you choose to stay silent, you're responding with maturity and clarity. You're telling yourself, I don't need to match his energy. I rise above it. Silence becomes your boundary when words would only be twisted. It creates space between his drama and your dignity. He might be used to a cycle, provoke, react, repeat. But when you don't play the game, you break the pattern. And that frustrates someone who relies on your reaction to feel powerful. You're not being cold, you're being in control. People who expect you to break usually thrive off your vulnerability. They want to see if they can still affect you, if they can still pull you back in. Your silence tells them, you don't live in my head anymore. That's not detachment, that's healing. It's not that you don't feel pain, it's that you're choosing not to perform your pain for someone who doesn't deserve to witness it. You're giving your emotions a safe space with yourself, not with someone who mishandled them. There's strength in choosing who gets access to your heart. Silence is that choice. It's a quiet refusal to let him see you crumble. In relationships, especially after a breakup or a painful argument, silence can be misinterpreted. But real silence, the intentional kind, is not about playing games. It's about growth. It's a conscious decision to prioritize your healing over his validation. While he waits for the text, the call, the confession, you're focused on your peace. That silence, that's you creating space to become stronger, wiser, and more aligned with what you truly deserve. He may think he has control because you're not chasing, but the truth is you've taken control by not reacting at all. That's what real emotional power looks like. Silence forces people to reflect in ways noise never can. When you stop explaining, defending, or pleading, you shift the pressure onto them. He's no longer distracted by your words. He has to face the echo of his own actions. And that's uncomfortable. That's where the real reckoning happens, in the stillness. Let him wonder. Let him sit in the space your silence creates. That space is sacred. It's yours. And the more he waits for you to break, the more he realizes he underestimated your strength. You're no longer proving your worth. You're letting your absence speak it loud and clear. Often, women are taught to fix, to mend, to reach out, but what if healing doesn't look like another message? What if healing is sitting with your emotions quietly, without needing to broadcast them? When you stop reaching out, you begin reaching in. That's where the transformation starts. That's where confidence is rebuilt. Not in the response you're hoping for, but in the moment you decide you don't need one. He expected tears. He expected begging. But you gave him stillness, and that stillness is louder than any apology or explanation you could ever give. Choosing silence is not an act of weakness. It's an act of self-respect. It says, I value my peace more than your attention. And that changes everything. It's easy to chase closure, to want the last word, to demand understanding. But sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is walk away with your dignity untouched. You don't need to prove how hurt you are. You don't need to dramatize your pain. You just need to choose you. Every minute you don't text back is a minute you remind yourself that you're not someone's emotional backup plan. You're the priority in your life and eventually in someone else's too. You're not going silent because you're afraid to speak. You're silent because you've already said enough with your actions, your boundaries, and your presence. Now it's about preserving your energy. Let him wonder why you disappeared. Let him feel the absence of your effort. People often realize what they had when it's no longer readily available. You were available before, emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically, but now you're reserved for better. Silence becomes a statement. I'm done explaining my worth. He wanted a reaction. You gave him a reality check instead. The truth is, silence isn't always easy. It's tempting to break it, just to feel seen, heard, understood. But what you must remember is that you are always seen by yourself. You are always heard in your own inner dialogue, and you are always understood by the part of you that knows your worth. Every time you choose silence over chaos, you grow. You're no longer responding to old triggers. You're creating new standards. Silence doesn't mean you're okay. It means you're prioritizing getting okay. In your own time, your own space, your own way. That is power. That is healing. He's waiting for the moment you crack, and that should tell you everything you need to know. Anyone who's waiting for your weakness doesn't deserve your strength. He may think this is a game. He may expect you to fall into old habits, but your silence proves you've evolved. You're not who you were before. You don't operate from desperation anymore. You operate from self-worth. Silence isn't about ignoring him. It's about honoring you. It's about choosing your growth over his curiosity. You've stopped performing for someone who stopped valuing you. And that's where real freedom begins. He wanted power over your emotions. Instead, you reclaimed power over yourself. That's what silence does. It recenters your energy. You're not silencing yourself to disappear. You're doing it to reappear. Stronger, wiser, more in tune with your value. Let him wonder. Let him wait. Because the version of you he thought he could break is gone. And in her place stands someone who doesn't need to prove a thing. He was expecting your collapse. What he got was your comeback. Quiet, graceful, and unshakable. Every day you stay grounded in your silence, you're telling the world, I choose me. When someone thrives off your pain, it's not a relationship, it's a power struggle. The moment you realize that is the moment everything begins to change. You see, there are people who don't actually want resolution, they want a reaction. They feed off your confusion, your anxiety, your hope. They don't want you healed, they want you hooked. And as long as you keep engaging, they keep winning. That's why pulling away is not weakness, it's strategy. You're not ghosting. When you stop chasing someone who only shows up when it benefits them, you start reclaiming the love you were giving away for free. Your pain was never meant to be entertainment. We often get trapped in the illusion that if we just try harder, love harder, show more patience, they'll finally see our worth. But someone who is emotionally manipulative already sees your worth. That's why they test your boundaries. They want to know how far you'll bend, how deep you'll chase, how loud you'll cry. The more emotional currency you spend trying to win them over, the richer they get in control. That's not love, that's leverage. And the more you invest, the more trapped you become. Walking away isn't giving up, it's waking up. You stop playing a game that was never meant to be fair. And in doing that, you win back your freedom. Chasing someone who thrives off your heartbreak turns you into a shadow of who you were. You start measuring your worth by how they respond, how often they reply, how much attention they throw your way. And every time they withdraw, you blame yourself. You think, what did I do wrong? When the real question should be, why am I still trying? You become a version of yourself who's constantly proving, explaining, justifying, instead of being. That's not a relationship. That's an emotional tug of war where the rope always burns your hands. The moment you stop chasing, the rope drops. And for once you can breathe. When someone gets satisfaction from your suffering, it's because they feel powerful when you're disempowered. It has nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. Your heartbreak is their ego boost. They want to know they can still get under your skin, that they can still make you cry, that they can still affect your peace. And the more you show that they can, the more they pull back. Not to protect you, but to prove that they have you wrapped around their finger. But what happens when you don't react? When you don't chase? When you stop showing that they still have that grip? You break the cycle. Sometimes the chase isn't even about the person, it's about the hope. The hope that they'll change. The hope that they'll finally apologize. The hope that all the pain will mean something. And that hope is what keeps you stuck. Because every moment you spend waiting for someone to become who you need them to be is a moment you delay becoming that person for yourself. The truth is, they might never change. They might never feel guilt. They might never say sorry. But that doesn't have to be your ending. You don't need their redemption to start your healing. The moment you let go of that hope, you begin to find your peace. It's time to stop assigning value to breadcrumbs. Just because someone reaches out occasionally doesn't mean they care deeply. Just because they don't want to lose you doesn't mean they want to love you properly. There's a difference between possession and affection. One is about control, the other is about connection. If they only show up when you pull away, that's not love, that's insecurity. That's someone who doesn't want to lose their power, not someone who's afraid of losing you. And once you see that clearly, the chase ends. You stop mistaking inconsistency for affection. You start demanding consistency first from yourself. You are not hard to love. You are not too much. You're not asking for the impossible. What you're asking for is presence, respect, honesty, effort, things that healthy love always gives. But when someone benefits from your pain, they make you feel like your standards are unreasonable. They flip the script and convince you that if only you were more chill, more patient, more forgiving, then they'd stay. That's how emotional manipulation works. It disguises control as compatibility, and you keep shrinking to fit into a connection that was never meant to hold your full self. The only way out is to stop chasing, to let them sit with your absence and finally feel the loss. The fear of being alone often keeps us chasing what's already gone. But loneliness with your dignity is far more healing than company that crushes your spirit. When you chase someone who benefits from your struggle, you're choosing short-term validation over long-term peace. Every ignored text, every cold shoulder, every mixed signal, they're not random, they're calculated. They're reminders that your pain fuels their pride. And when you see that clearly, you no longer romanticize the connection. You recognize it for what it was: one-sided, performative, conditional. Letting go becomes the first act of self-love, and the relief that follows is real. They may come back, they often do, but it's not because they've changed. It's because they miss the control. They miss being the one you cried over, the one you chased. They don't miss you. They miss the power they felt when you were vulnerable. That's why when they reach out, it feels confusing. You start wondering if maybe they care after all. But the question isn't, do they care? It's, do they respect you? Do they honor you? Do they show up consistently? If not, then it's not real. It's just a test to see if they still have access. And when you don't give it, you part. You can feel pain and still choose peace. You can feel everything, anger, sadness, betrayal, and still decide that it's not going to control your actions. That's what emotional maturity looks like. It's not about being numb or pretending you're unaffected. It's about knowing that just because you feel something intensely doesn't mean you have to express it destructively. When someone hurts you and expects you to lash out, go off, or beg, choosing calm confuses them. It shows growth. It shows that your self-control is stronger than their manipulation. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. This is where your healing begins. Not in chaos, but in clarity. They might expect you to call them out, to send the long text, to try to get the last word. But what happens when you do none of that? What happens when you keep your focus on yourself instead? That's when you reclaim your narrative. You stop trying to be understood by someone who refuses to listen, and instead, you start understanding yourself. You start asking better questions. Not why did they treat me this way, but why did I stay? And once you start answering those honestly, you gain power. You realize their behavior no longer deserves your analysis. You choose peace, not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself more. Every time you resist the urge to explain yourself to someone who never tried to understand you, you heal a little. It's a subtle kind of healing, the quiet kind, the kind where your self-worth whispers louder than your wounds. You realize you don't need to convince them of your value. You just need to believe it yourself. They wanted to see you crack, to see you spiral. But what they didn't expect was silence, maturity, that calm confidence that says, I know who I am and I don't need you to validate it. That's not pride. That's power. And that power doesn't come from being emotionless, it comes from being emotionally grounded. When you stop responding to chaos, you take away its fuel. They can poke, provoke, bait, and guilt trip. But if you don't bite, the game falls apart. That's how you win. Not by proving a point, but by refusing to play. You begin to realize that not every invitation to conflict requires an RSVP. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. And that boundary, that's growth. That's knowing the difference between protecting your peace and proving your position. You don't owe them a breakdown. You don't owe them your emotional labor. You owe yourself your own evolution. And that starts with choosing to stay grounded, no matter how loud the noise gets. It's natural to want closure, to want to say that one last thing, to want to make them see what they did. But real closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your acceptance. Acceptance that they may never get it. Acceptance that your healing can't wait for their understanding. When you let go of needing them to get it, you finally free yourself. You stop being stuck in a cycle of reaction. You stop handing them the pen to your story. Because every time you respond from pain, you rewrite the narrative to revolve around them. But when you respond from peace, you take the story back. Some people don't want peace. They want control. They want to know they can still affect your mood, your thoughts, your day. And every time you react, you give them that control. You hand them the remote to your emotions. But when you choose peace, you change the channel. You say, this show doesn't play here anymore. And they feel that shift, that silence, that unavailability. And it forces them, not because you're punishing them, but because you've stopped participating. You've stopped giving them the emotional currency they once lived on. And in doing so, you reclaim your strength without saying a word. Your silence is not weakness, it's discipline. It's choosing your mental health over a moment of emotional release. It's understanding that maturity isn't about never feeling, it's about never letting someone else dictate how you feel, especially someone who doesn't care about your well-being. Your silence says, I'm not giving you the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. It says, I've outgrown the need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding me. That's not avoidance, that's alignment. You're aligning your actions with your values, your energy with your healing, and that is the kind of growth they can't touch. Let them think you're cold. Let them think you're distant. Let them think you've changed, because you have. You've changed from someone who needed their validation to someone who validates themselves, from someone who chased peace in other people to someone who creates it within. That shift is uncomfortable for them, but for you, it's freedom. You no longer live in reaction mode. You live in response, in intention. You choose when, how, and if you engage. And that makes you untouchable. Not because you don't feel, but because you no longer perform your pain for people who never deserved front row seats. Every time you choose peace over drama, you build emotional muscle. The kind of strength that doesn't look like loud declarations or revenge plans. The kind that looks like stillness, like confidence, like walking away with your dignity intact. Peace is quiet, but it's not passive. It's active. It's a decision you make again and again when your old patterns try to pull you back. It's you saying, I've done chaos before. I choose something better now. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because that peace, that's where you find clarity. That's where you find yourself again. They don't need to see you break for your healing to be real. And you don't need to scream your worth for it to matter. Let your peace speak for you. Let your silence do the talking. The more you ground yourself, the less their actions can shake you. You stop being a puppet in their drama and start being the author of your own calm. That's where real strength lives. Not in the noise, but in the stillness that follows. Not in the reaction, but in the decision to rise above it. And every time you do, you build a life where their chaos no longer fits. The best revenge isn't anger, it's growth. It's becoming the version of yourself you were always meant to be. The one who doesn't beg for love, who doesn't chase attention, who doesn't crumble when someone walks away. You don't get even by breaking down, you get even by leveling up. While he's waiting for you to break, to come running back, to lose yourself over him, you're building a life so rich, so fulfilling, that his absence feels like a blessing. You stop checking your phone and start checking your goals. You stop replaying the past and start rewriting your future. He doesn't need to see your pain. He needs to feel your peace. And peace, real peace, is louder than any apology you never got. That's how you become unforgettable. Not through tears, but through transformation. He expected you to collapse, but instead you evolved. You picked yourself up without his help. And that's what shakes him the most. He thought he was your anchor, but really, he was your storm, and storms don't stay. You became your own calm. The glow up isn't just about your appearance. It's your energy, your boundaries, your silence. He notices when you stop reaching out, when you stop trying, when you stop explaining, and suddenly the power shifts. Not because you took it from him, but because you stopped giving it away. There's nothing more powerful than a woman who finally realizes she doesn't need the person who once made her feel small. You didn't just walk away, you rose. You start to see the beauty in your solitude. You start discovering parts of yourself that were buried beneath all the trying and proving. You remember what it feels like to laugh without guilt, to dream without limits, to wake up without wondering what mood he'll be in. That kind of freedom is addictive, and while he's waiting for a sign that you're still stuck on him, you're creating a life where his name no longer echoes. You don't heal by waiting for them to care. You heal by showing up for yourself every day, especially on the days it's hard. He expected you to fall apart, but instead, you came back stronger, softer, and more self-aware. That's not just healing, that's reinvention. The woman he thought he broke no longer exists. She outgrew the version of herself that tolerated mixed signals, late replies, and emotional crumbs. She stopped making excuses for his behavior and started setting standards for her own. That shift is powerful because once you stop proving your worth to someone else, you start proving it to yourself, and that changes everything. You dress for you grow for you smile because you mean it, not because you're hoping he sees it. And maybe one day he will see it, but by then it won't matter because you won't need him to recognize your glow. You'll already be too far ahead, shining without him. He was expecting your pain to define you, but you used it to refine you. Every tear you cried became fuel. Every silent night became a lesson. Every disappointment taught you something about what you deserve. And instead of becoming bitter, you became better. That's the kind of strength you can't fake. It's the kind of growth that doesn't scream, it radiates. And people notice. He notices. He starts to wonder how someone he thought he broke now looks unbothered, unavailable, untouchable. That's because you did the work. The inner work, the hard work, the kind of work that builds not just confidence, but character. And once you've done that, you never look back. You don't need to prove that you're over him. You just need to be present in your own life again. That's where the real shift happens, not in showing him you've moved on, but in genuinely moving forward. You're no longer stuck in the what ifs or maybes. You're focused on the what's next. And that's a powerful place to be. You start attracting different energy, better people, new opportunities, because the version of you that once settled now sets standards. And those standards protect your peace. They remind you that love should never feel like confusion and relationships should never feel like war. You've been through enough battles. Now you're building a sanctuary. Every day you show up for yourself is a day you show him and the world that you're not someone to break. You're someone who bends, who weathers storms, but always comes back stronger. That resilience is rare, and that's why it sticks. He remembers your kindness, he remembers your loyalty, but what he never expected was your strength, especially the kind that doesn't need revenge, only redirection. You stopped making him the center of your story and placed yourself back at the heart of it. That's when everything changed. You didn't have to scream to be heard. You just had to rise. And you did, quietly and completely. Let him wonder. Let him scroll through your photos. Let him overthink your silence. That's not about playing games. It's about living your truth. Because healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means deciding that hurt doesn't get to hold you hostage anymore. You're no longer trying to make him regret losing you. You're just focused on never losing yourself again. And that kind of clarity is powerful. You don't chase, you don't beg, you simply elevate. You stop looking back at doors that closed and start opening new ones that lead to peace, purpose, and joy. He lost access and you gain perspective. There's something deeply powerful about a woman who no longer needs closure because she gave it to herself. You stopped waiting for apologies, for explanations, for what could have been. Instead, you started creating what will be. That forward motion scares people who were used to you being stuck. But that's not your problem anymore. Your focus has shifted. Your heart is healing. In your energy, it's sacred now. You don't just let anyone in. You don't just give your light away. You protect it. You honor it. You grow it. And that light, it no longer flickers for someone who walked away. It burns for you and the future you're creating. He wanted to see you break, but what he saw was you becoming whole. That's the plot twist. That's the moment you stop trying to prove anything and just live, not in reaction to him, but in alignment with yourself. You become the version of you that doesn't need to convince, chase, or overextend. You become the version of you that wakes up excited, not anxious, that trusts herself, that chooses peace over proving a point. And while he's stuck wondering how you moved on, you're already living a life that feels like freedom. You didn't break, you bloomed.